Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today's star of the show is an Orvis rear drag reel. Hard for me to say. It's a #1. It comes from Russell in California. It doesn't look like it's ever been used. Very clean, no line on it, no evidence that it's ever been used, but tight. And my thinking is perhaps it's been sitting around a while and it just needs to be lubed up and put back into service here. So we're going to take it apart. We'll show you how it's made, and we'll give you an idea about how to service a rear drag reel, whether it's an Orvis or not, and you'll be able to do your own if you have one. So rear drag fishing reels, very popular in the fresh water. They enable you to adjust your drag tension without crossing your hands over while you're reeling and perhaps interfering with the line. If you're fighting a fish, you can simply back it off or tighten it up from below as you're fighting that fish, and it's very convenient and comfortable in doing so. The problem is that max drag is always a low number on this, because max drag is a function of surface area of drag washers, and you just can't get a lot of surface area in a small container like this. So max drag on these usually, about the capacity is usually about 7, 8, 10 pounds maybe, and that's probably why you don't see the rear drag that much in saltwater fighting reels. All right, so we took the handle off, and when we take the handle off, I like to take the time to thank our first responders and essential personnel and everybody who's responsible for trying to keep us safe during this pandemic. Your efforts truly are appreciated, and I'd like to thank you for that. All right, we remove all of the external parts that we can before we open up the case. That includes the spool. The spool is a push-button spool. That's common on a rear drag fishing reel because there are no top drags, so it doesn't matter, to put a wing nut or something else in there. All right, so that's pretty common. We'll show you how to get the rotor off. There's not much going on under a rotor, but we will show you that. And this case probably comes off without taking the adjuster knob off, but we're going to take the adjuster knob off to show you the mechanics behind the rear drag fishing reel. And I believe in this one, all you're going to do is just simply unscrew it. Once you take that mounting screw out, just unscrew it. Now, be careful when you're doing rear drag fishing reels. There's all different ways that they mount that case, little tension cap, and sometimes they're easy like this one was, and sometimes they're very difficult. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to shatter a case. And I've had that come in on a couple of Shimanos now where people weren't aware of how that housing went, and we had a broken bottom end of the assembly. Okay, 4 case screws. We're going to go ahead and take them off. That's going to get us to our gears. So Orvis is a very high-end outdoor apparel and fishing shop. Kind of along the way that Abercrombie and Fitch was at one point. Orvis had fishing reels made for them. Originally they were made in Italy, the early Orvis, and I'm not quite sure. This one's made in Thailand, so I'm not quite sure who's making this reel for them, but Orvis is a store brand. It's not a real manufacturer. So Thailand, I think we have Daiwa in Thailand, and we may have Shimano there, but that doesn't mean that those are the guys making these fishing reels for Orvis. I'm not familiar with the design. The design kind of looks a little bit like the Daiwa line of the times, but I can't say with certainty who it is that put this one together. I guess a little research would show. But the other thing with these rear drag fishing reels is they tend to be a lot less expensive than the traditional reels, and that's because they don't need to build in a lot of heavy duty durability to them, because you're fighting fish typically in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pound range, but you're not taking the beating, and they're generally not used in saltwater environments. So when you can take that element out of there, you can certainly design around that and make it easy. Okay, we have a bushing, not a bearing. let's take the bushing off. When you take the bushing off, I'm going to tell you a couple of things right now. Go ahead and take pictures of what's going on with your fishing reel. That way, if you're working without a schematic like I am at the moment, if you get stuck, you can go back and you can check, where did this piece come from, how was this part assembled, and so on. You want to make certain to do that, and you also want to make certain that you have them in the right sequence. For example, this washer came out and this bushing came out. Well, my memory's getting bad, but at least I remember that this was on top. If you didn't know that and you went to reinstall, it's very easy to put that washer in here and then have a poor installation. Also notice that there's a stud on each side of this bushing, and that stud was laying in, which means when you go to put it back in the case, look for the indentations on both sides of that case, and then the stud goes top side this way, because that's what's going to face the main gear. And if you don't put it in that way, you're going to jam the case here, and the reel's not going to operate properly because it'll be out of alignment. Okay, I'm also putting those pieces into a parts tray, nothing more than the bottom of a fast food tray. I'm also wearing a protective glove. Those of you that watch the video know that I like to keep the grease and the like off my hands. And somebody just asked me the other day why I don't wear a glove on my right hand. Well, I just don't have the feeling and sensitivity that I think I need to work these by wearing that glove. So I'd like to wear it, but I kind of forego that for the sense of being able to do this. Sometimes you can remove the main gear without removing the axle shaft. Sometimes you can't. We're going to try right now, and we can't. There's a drive gear on the back of the main gear, and the axle shaft gets in the way of that. We'll show you when we take it out. So you need to remove this clip, which is holding the axle shaft into the crosswind block. Let's go ahead and do that. That's another reason why I use this parts tray, because there's very small pieces and parts on some fishing reels, and if you just lay them on your desk and have something brush against it, well, a piece or part goes somewhere, and then you're kind of stuck. And I can tell you, I've looked for enough pieces and parts that I've kind of learned that the parts tray is a better alternative to that. All right, this has got a little lever, kind of a clip here, just trying to get it up. There we go. You can see by the way it mounts, and then you can pull that in. Now that design is very much a Shimano kind of a clip. Not to say that this reel was made by Shimano, I don't know, but that's very much a Shimano clip. Alright, once you do that, then you hold your crosswind block and you can pull your axle shaft out of that. Now you can remove the main gear. Remember, we have those two shim washers on that main gear. Remove the main gear, and we have a bushing on the other side. So bushings are an alternative to bearings. You don't need the bearings on a reel like this, again, because of the type of fishing it's doing. But bushings is also a way to save a couple of pennies here and there, as opposed to a bearing. And a lot of manufacturers will go ahead and do that. Same thing, only smaller on this side, but it's got the tabs. You want to make sure that you get those tabs properly aligned in that case. And here I just want to put that bushing right in. I don't want to leave that in my parts tray. I don't need to. It just happened that it came out with the main gear. And put it back in there for safekeeping, so to speak. Here's what we were talking about before with that axle shaft. With the axle shaft, it's riding between these two. So if you went to try and pull that axle shaft out, you're bumping against this, and only bad things happen. Notice on the back of this main gear that we have this little hook spring. And a lot of people wonder where that's coming from. Well, when we go to reinstall this after we've greased it up and cleaned it up and everything, we are going to look through one of those little holes in that main gear there. You see the four of them. We're going to line that up, something like that. Look through that hole, and you're going to see a fork on the anti-reverse dog. That's where the spring goes. So if you're having trouble aligning that dog, or it doesn't work after you've serviced your reel, it's because that spring is not in that centering position. And that's what we're going to do when we take care of this. We're just going to lay these off to the side for a moment, and we can put them in our parts tray if we like. And I'm just going to go up top. There's really nothing happening on the up top of the rotor, but I'm going to show you it anyway. Take that top screw out. That's a hold fast for that rotor nut. That rotor nut, I believe, is a 12 millimeter, and this should be a 12 millimeter socket. It's an old Mitchell tool. Loosen it, and then we take the balance out by hand if you can. This is screwing counterclockwise. And you can remove your rotor, and all you're going to find up top here is the trip mechanism, which is going to ride on this bail. And you're going to ride that little anti-reverse collar, which is kind of interesting because we don't have a dog up there. And you have a bearing. So you have the option at this point of removing the bearing. This one is excellent condition. I don't see a need to do that, but I am going to oil it, and that's what makes the sense here in terms of doing that. Oh, there's the piece. Okay, so let me correct myself here. So you have your tooth ratchet here. Let's get this back on for a moment. Set that down, and here's the tail end of your anti-reverse dog. So when that sets in, it's going to lock it up top here. You can see how it comes in and locks on that ledge to anti-reverse. And that's what's going to be spring driven by that main gear. All right, mystery solved. I'm going to use a fishing reel oil, Real-X in this case. It's an aftermarket synthetic. I'm going to flood the bearing with that. I oil bearings. I don't grease them. And we're going to use a fishing reel grease. We're going to use Penn Precision reel grease here. And then this reel looks new. I don't believe this reel was ever used, but it looks like we had some grease and oils and the like that have dried out. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I'm just going to make sure we get a nice healthy dose of grease onto that pinion gear. No need to clean it out. It's clean. I checked that. Okay, so I paused for a moment after we finished lubing the top up. I just started to put the crosswind gear in, and then I thought the better of myself that we should go to the rear drag first and then come back. So if that falls out, well, we probably should just take it out. Put it into our little tray. Alright, so to service the drag, this comes off. You remove the screw from the bottom and you turn it in a counterclockwise manner. And then there's this clip here that holds the drag assembly in place. So grab a little pin or something. This is a spring. It is going to shoot. So do what I did there and just kind of hold it in the back. If you're using a pin, make sure you don't poke your finger there. But pull that out. And then once you pull that out, you can simply take the top end and push the whole assembly down to remove it. And this is your drag stack. So there's a couple of drag washers and a couple of eared washers in this one. And what we want to do is just check it. So if you have it in pieces and parts and you're just wondering how it came, well, it starts with a little washer in the bottom of this cap. Then there's a spring. And then we have a series. We have 2 of these eared washers, and we have 3 drag washers in total. So there's a lot of drag in this reel. So you'll notice the first 2 are solid metal. And then we have a drag washer. Just separating these for your view. And we have what's called a keyed washer. It doesn't have ears on it. It's a round washer, and this has drag washers on both sides. Then it has another of the eared washers, another of the drag washers, and this is clean as I expected. And then there's one more drag washer up top, which will seat in the case here. So I just want to inspect them, clean them if it's an issue. I just wanted to take this apart to examine those and to make sure that they were functional and everything was right. So here's your drag washer. I just separated that. It's nice and clean. It doesn't need any lubrication. If you felt like it did, you could always put a drop of oil on it. Here's it's called the keyed washer. It holds the shaft where the eared washers hold the body. So that comes in next. Then we have the eared washer, and we have a washer that's going to hold the spring, and then the spring assembly is going to go on like that. So what you want to do to reinstall after you've checked them is you want to align the two eared washers. You can hold your clip washer here, and notice that up top here there's a spring. Might be a little hard to see, but there's a spring here, and that spring is going to be a tension spring for your click. So don't lose that one as you go about. What you're going to do is you're going to pull that back. We'll do that in a moment. Take your aligned pieces, find the slots. There's two slots here. You want to come in with those two slots, make sure that they seat properly. You got one of them in. And then you want to just push that up. Then you have your spring and your cap and the little collar on the bottom. Hold this tight. Get your clip that we just took out. And then there's a channel for that clip. Just seat it in properly, push it in until it seats below the rim, and then you're okay. Now on this top side here you have that little spring. That spring is going to act as a click. You just want to pull that behind the gear. So that's how it sits here. Well, it's hard to see, but that's how it sits there in the tooth of the gear. Okay, we'll put this assembly back on here then. We'll grab our cap. This is a plastic cap. You want to make sure that it gets on even. Don't cross thread it. You'll feel it right away. If it's not going on easy like this, it's not on properly. Once you hear it clicking, you know you're getting closer to the tightening sequence. And when you have it tightened all the way down, you can put the hold screw in on the bottom. Then we can rebuild the rest of the reel then. Okay, so next up then we can go back to that gear that I've already greased. I checked the teeth on, made sure everything was right there. Put the stud to the bottom because that's the only way you're going to be able to get the clearance to put the clip on. Go over, I have already greased this, but remember what we were saying here about that little angular spring that's going to have to go in the fork on the anti-reverse here. So you want to make sure that you can take this leg and put it through a view hole like this one here, so that when you look through it this way you can see that that piece. This belongs on the back. I probably should have put that in before the crosswind block, so let's go ahead and do that. Crosswind block hasn't been out this much. There's two studs. Remember, one coming out of each side of it, 180 degrees apart. Those studs belong on the top side of the case. So the top side being what you're looking at, and then they need to seat into the case like that so that they are flush. All right, put that one more time. We're going to take our sighted back end leg. We're going to look over. Oops. Need the rest of it in first. Need this crosswind block in. No, we don't. But I'll put that in. Crosswind block goes on the bar here. Now, you can cheat. You can look over the top to make sure you're close. And then you can use that sight line there for verification, and I happen to see that it's in right now. And then I had one of these little shim washers fall off the main gear here. All right, with that in then, grab your axle shaft. I'm going to use my parts tray. Make sure it's nice and clean. Put a light coat of grease on there. Don't put a lot on there because it's only going to get squeezed out when you put it through the pinion gear. Just enough light grease to let it slide. There's a flat side. The flat side's going to come to the front. So I'm going to align that crosswind block. And you got two things you got to align up here. You got to get that through the crosswind block like that. And then you may have to twist it to get it through the hold down for that the drag stack. Next up, you want to align those two little indentations so that you can fit your tie down clip. One goes above, one goes below. Don't force this thing. It's got a tight tolerance to it. You want to be close. But if you find that it's not seating easily, then you don't have it set up properly with the alignment, and you're going to have to do it, or you'll bend it. And I've seen a couple of Shimano's come in particular, like the FX series, and they've got bent retention springs, and unfortunately the reel doesn't go up and down, or it operates pretty tight because it's out of balance. All right, we just put the clip in, tied it down with the hold down screw, and now we've got the side plate and the bushing. You can put a little bit on there. Bushings are petrochemical products. They really don't need to be, these plastic bushings don't need to be lubed, but if you put a little lube on there, you will get the slip that's needed for that drive shaft on your main gear. So we'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to put the 4 of these in. These things are a little cumbersome. They're long screws. They're I don't remember the name of it. They're not the fine threaded screws. They're the more difficult or rough threaded screws. Coarse threaded, whatever the right word might be. Alright, so if you like these types of videos, I'm going to ask you to subscribe. I work on all kinds of reels, this being one of them. I work on the saltwater reels, freshwater reels. I work on bait casters and conventional and spinning and all types of reels. And if you like that type of video, please subscribe. And if you do subscribe, hit the notifications, because the notifications are going to tell you when I post. And I do post frequently. And if you're looking for a particular video, well, then the best thing to do is get the notification. You won't miss them. And I've been trying to post every day. As a kind of a tribute to the front line and essential workers. I appreciate everything they're doing on the front lines. It's not easy, and it's not easy posting every day either. It's a task, but it's nothing compared to what they're doing. And so I've been sort of trying to do that to keep everybody else's minds off of it during the pandemic, and trying to keep the kind of lines of communication open, if you will. So please do that. If you have a question on this reel or any reel in particular, might be one you're working on and you're stuck, maybe something is going on with your reel and you're not sure if it needs a repair or what might be happening, leave it in the comments section. I do try to respond to all the comments, and I will try to respond to yours. These screws are long and they're not easy to put in with my hand strength, so I do apologize if it looks like, what is he doing here? And we'll just do the one more. Usually you can do these with a Phillips head, but for some reason these are just being a little bit stubborn. That's why you see me changing from time to time with these screwdrivers. This one seems to do okay with the piece. Some folks ask about the mechanical screwdrivers. I don't recommend them. I don't like the torque on them, particularly on a case like this. This is a plastic case, and that will shatter a case from time to time if you're not careful in how you put those screws back in. Alright, so I think we just need to tighten this one more down just a little bit, and we're good to go. Alright, so we're going to reattach the handle. Gonna make sure that our drag works after the take apart. Put the spool back on. We'll give it a test drive. This is a collapsible handle. You can put a drop of oil in there just to keep it lubricated. Again, this reel doesn't look like it's been fished at all. If it has been fished, it's been very light. So it's got a 5.2 to 1 retrieve ratio. And it's turning nicely. It should with some fresh grease. Check the drag stack here, make sure that we're tight on that. This thing says it can use 4, 6, or 8 pound test. That makes sense. Now the drag stack is nice and tight. I'm going to loosen it up. I always recommend that if you're not fishing the reel, back your drag off. There it is. That's the Orvis #1 rear drag fishing reel. Circa late 80s, early 90s, I'm going to guess, by the case design. Might be a little bit newer. This one hasn't been used, and this one's going to go back fishing. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Please take care of yourself, stay safe, wear your masks, maintain your social distancing, and be careful. And if you have the opportunity to get the virus, highly recommend the virus vaccine. I highly recommend it. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.